Along the way, we'll talk with Cyndi Lauper and Don Henley, plus news about Led Zeppelin and more. But first, a word about this new experiment we call the Rock and Roll Evening News. We believe rock is the music of America, and it deserves its own show. In the weeks ahead, we'll be here bringing you news and analysis from our expert reporters, interviews and special reports on your favorite stars, along with our live, no lip-syncing performances here in our studios in Hollywood. As you've already seen, we don't have lots of smoke machines and colored lights on our performers, and as you're about to see in Bob Hilburn's talk with Paul McCartney, we won't clutter up our interviews with videos and clips. We're tired of all that, and we think you are too. One production note, our show is in stereo, and so are all of our individual segments. Right now, I want you to meet our senior correspondent, Robert Hilburn. Bob is widely considered to be one of the best rock journalists in America. For the past 15 years, he's been the rock critic for the Los Angeles Times. His recent book on Bruce Springsteen became a bestseller. Bob, before you show us any of the first part of your McCartney interview, I want to know something. You've interviewed the biggest names in rock: Springsteen, Michael Jackson. Is it any different interviewing a Beatle, especially Paul McCartney?
Steve, I think it is something special every time you interview a Beatle. There's so much rock history and sociology and pop culture wrapped up in these guys that it's something magical. Even Paul McCartney likes talking about those old days now. Take a look.
Paul McCartney was a quiet, well-behaved lad until his mother died when he was 14. Then he turned his attention to forming a band with pal John Lennon. The Beatles began on the Liverpool circuit, but they soon conquered the world. Paul got tagged the cute one, and he remained the heartthrob throughout the Beatles' 10-year reign as the world's best-loved group. But when he released his first solo album, he was blamed unfairly for the breakup of the band.
It does get difficult to do rock and roll in that kind of group way. I don't know, you know. I think the thing about it is, as I say, you know, we came full cycle. It was very much that, you know, it was only kind of 10 years, really, the Beatles thing, the span. And we started to get a bit cheesed off with each other, and a little bit, you know, the tension started creeping in towards the end. So seeing as it did finish, I think we all left it and thought, well, it's just as well it's finished, really. And in fact, the last photograph we had taken as a group photo was the same pose as the first group photo we'd had taken, only this time there were beards and stuff.
Was that intentionally made, or was
Yeah, we did that intentionally, because we felt it was a wind-up, you know, we felt this is it, you know, we've come the full span, really, sort of running out of ideas. Personally, I, you know, would have loved for it to have continued, but seeing as it didn't, I'm sort of glad, because it's kind of complete. You didn't get to see us going on and sort of trying to keep it up.
Well, you know, after you broke up in the 70s, you didn't want to talk about the Beatles anymore.
That's right.
And then you got to a point where I think you said, one time you told me that, okay, let's talk about it this one time, and then we'll clear all the questions out, how I feel about John, how I feel about everything else, and then you'll go away and we can go on with your life. Now, is that something that annoys you, or is it something that you don't mind anymore?
No, I quite like it, you know. I think, you know, when the Beatles broke up, there's a lot of business troubles, a lot of all this, so we were likening it to a divorce, that it was difficult to talk about the ex-wife or the ex-wives. You know, you didn't want to talk about it, you didn't want to know about it, you wanted to get on with your new thing and establish your new kind of identity. After a few years of that, in our case anyway, I think we all had kind of good memories of it all, and I certainly did. So it became a little easier to talk about it, and then after that, it became interesting to talk about it. And I'm at an age and a stage now where, I mean, if my kids want to know about it, I love it. I'll tell them all about it, you know. In fact, they have to shut me up.
Was the song Here Today, is that your kind of definitive statement about John? Do you think, I mean, how you feel about John?
Yeah, I found myself wanting to sort of talk to him, you know, because there's so many misunderstandings have gone down with all the business problems and everything. And after he died, it's final. There's no talking. So the only way I could think to do it was through a song. So that is me sort of talking to him, saying, oh, come on, you know, this. It's quite an emotional song.
Well, because in the end you say, I love you. Is that hard to do? And did you kind of think what I should do?
It's hard to do. It's hard to tell anyone you love them. I mean, a man and a wife, you know, fellas are like. You know, the minute you kind of go, say, I love you, you feel real embarrassed and you blush. I mean, I've always had a difficulty saying that, but you've got to do it, and you've got to say it because you mean it, you feel it. But it doesn't make it any easier to say it, and to me, say it to a fella is like impossible. But, you know, it's real, and I did love him greatly. So, what the hell?
Did you almost take it off the record? I mean, did you think twice about leaving it on?
No, I mean, when I wrote that song, I was sort of crying a bit. It was a very emotional song to write, so I just wrote it like it came. I didn't bother thinking about editing it and stuff. It was really me talking to him. I found a way to talk to him. I didn't have to go to a seance.
The one thing I'd heard was that you might never do another live show because of fear of what happened to John.
Yeah.
That's no...
I think people thought that around about the time. I think not just me. I think they thought a lot of people, you know, no one will ever do a live show again. But you can't live your life like that, you know. It's you have to kind of get on with it, and obviously you take all the precautions you can. But it's not just me, as I say. It's the same for everyone, you know. There's nutters out there, you know. I prefer not to really talk about it. I just get on with what I do, and I'm careful, like anyone else. But when the time comes, the great skiffler in the sky calls, you know.
Now that we've talked to Paul about the Beatles, we'll look next week at his solo career, the good albums, and a few so disappointing you wonder why he even released them.
Thanks, Bob.
See ya.
Correspondent Robert Hilburn, music editor of the LA Times, reminisced with McCartney at length about his Beatle days. Tonight, in part 2 of our interview with McCartney, he focuses on life after the Beatles. Bob, how do you think McCartney feels about his body of solo work in general? Critics haven't always been too kind to him.
Well, Steve, to say that critics haven't always been too kind to McCartney is a very kind way of putting it. I mean, some of the reviews, including ones I've written, have been devastating, but he seems to have a good perspective on it. Notice in the interview how he handles the whole topic.
After the Beatles let it be for good, Paul McCartney found his own wings. He and that band, which included wife Linda, wound up selling several million more albums. Wings soared, but after their breakup, Paul's solo career has been like a roller coaster. His movie, Give My Regards to Broad Street, was universally panned by critics. But there's enthusiasm for his new album, Press to Play.
Let's talk about the new album. You seem frisky in this record. There's a certain confidence kind of that I sometimes don't find in your albums.
It's my breakfast cereal.
And so how can I put this diplomatically?
Just put it.
Okay, some of your albums, Band on the Run, Venus and Mars, Tug of War, there's a certain quality that a person has come to expect with
And some of the others there isn't.
Okay.
Right.
Do you see that difference between the records before you put them out? I mean, why might not you say, I'll hold this one back and won't put it out? Or like Back to the Egg, an album like that.
I think what happens is anyone who makes anything, art or just anything really, just you do your best, you do your job, you make your record, or you paint your picture, or you write your novel, and you put it out. Because at the time you put it out, you can't really tell whether it's one of your best ones or not. It's very difficult to be objective. You've done a lot of work. I mean, this interview, if it turns out to not be one of your best, it'll still go out. There's not going to be anyone saying, hey, let's not put that out. It's not, you know, so you put everything out. I find, it doesn't bother me really. I'm just happy that when there's a good one. I mean, looking at someone like Picasso's work, I'm not trying to compare myself with him, but similar type of idea. There's a lot of stuff that people think wasn't as good as Guernica or some of his greater paintings. To me, I kind of like it all, because it's Picasso. I like his dumpier ones a little bit, actually. I quite like to see he's human, and this one wasn't as good. Obviously, I liked the greater stuff better, but I don't really think of my work too preciously. It's too much of a pressure on your mind if you really always think, this must be the greatest thing I've ever done. I just do my job, I make music, I hope there's some songs in there that are going to turn people on. And there nearly always are, even in the albums that go down as not being the better albums.
Yes. So there seems to be an energy and an enthusiasm about this album on your part. Do you want to take that onto the road now and do live shows?
I quite fancy, you know, I just did a thing for the Prince's Trust in England, something to do with Prince Charles charity, and had a great band behind me. It's coming on HBO, actually, and it was a really good show, and it was fabulous. The audience were great, and I got off on it a lot. I just had to do 3 songs, ended up singing Get Back with Tina Turner and Paul Young, and it was fabulous. Such energy and stuff. Singing with Tina anyway, it brings a certain energy of its own. And it was just a blast, and I loved it, and it got me back thinking, you know, yeah, I must get in front of a live audience again. So I'm really just getting this album released and then going to look for a band.
Paul McCartney hasn't toured the U.S. in more than a decade, but now seems pressing to play our shores again. Like Bob Dylan and Mick Jagger, here's someone who doesn't seem ready to hang up his rock and roll shoes.